Group 11 is an exploration company focused on advanced stage zinc projects in the Republic of Ireland. The company's main project, Ballywire, was discovered in September 2022 and has shown very strong high-grade zinc-lead intercepts. Bart Jaworski is here to tell us about the project, and while lead and zinc are maybe not the sexiest of metals, they are growing demand for key for the energy transition. Good day, I'm Martin Gago with Market Radius Research. It's April 23rd. Please remember this is neither recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. Bart, thank you very much for joining us. Group 11 is a bit of an outlier, targeting unsexy metals in a jurisdiction that most North American mining investors are probably not too familiar with. I found the story to be very compelling, and I'm glad you're here to share it with us. Why don't you start off by telling us how you got involved with this project and your Canadian connection?
Well, thanks, Martin. Thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for joining us. Yeah, my name is Bart Jaworski. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the company. I'm a geologist and sell-side mining analyst, 25 years in the industry, about 12 of that on the sell side with Raymond James of Vancouver, and then Davey here in Dublin. Started this company basically in 2015 with David Furlong and another Irish geologist. The idea was very simple. We said, look, here we are in one of the richest zinc jurisdictions on the planet. The supply-demand fundamentals are looking favorable, and this could be an opportunity of a lifetime to start up a zinc company, take the bull by the horns and try to find one of these new big zinc deposits if we can. And so the good news is it only took us 7 years to make a discovery. So about 100 drill holes, $20 million, and that time of 7 years to get to our discovery hole. That's an interesting metric, but we got there, and that's a huge milestone. A lot of juniors cannot say that. You know, it's very few juniors that can go from grassroots exploration to an actual discovery. It is still early days. We had 25 holes into it, over 2.6 kilometers of strike. So it is starting to get pretty significant here, but it is early stage. But having said that, you know, I think we can hand on heart say that we've partially at least realized this vision so far, and the future is exciting. So I look forward to telling you the story here. But that's how I got involved with it, and this is kind of the story how it evolved. And if you want to just continue on here and tell you how the lay of the land for the company.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I guess the one big thing to mention right off the top is that Glencore is our largest shareholder with 18% of the company. They not only are our largest shareholder, but they have a director on our board, Ken Klassen. He's bottom left there, a mining M&A lawyer based in Toronto. We also have on the board Dan McInnes, who's a longtime mining exec and a geologist. We have myself then, and then Brendan Cahill, who's a lawyer by trade and also a longtime mining exec, and Alessandro Battelli, who's a chartered accountant, longtime mining executive, and involved with the Lundin Group of companies, most recently with Lundin Gold and also Filo, most recently, which is a $3 billion market cap company doing great things on the copper side. So that's the board. On the management side, we have Janine Webb over in Vancouver as our CFO rather. We have David Furlong and myself, basically the co-founders of the company, both based in Ireland, obviously. And David's done a lot of work here in Irish circles over his career. We also have Mark Holdstock, who's the most senior geo we have here, and he's well known in Irish circles for having discovered 20 million tons at the biggest zinc deposit in Ireland, which is Tara. So he discovered 20 million tons of that. So he's a great guy to have on board as well. So that's the team, if you will.
Bart, with Glencore's participation in it, can you just very briefly, when did they get involved, and after kind of what milestone or stage of discovery or exploration did they get involved with?
2019 is when they got involved. We are next door neighbors to each other, so we kind of staked in all around them. We have the dominant land position in that Palace area. We hadn't made the Ballywire discovery yet, but we do continue to have a small deposit butting up against their Palace Green deposit that we have, the Stone Park deposit, which I'll show you in a second. That's basically all we had. We had some interesting drilling to the south on trend from Palace Green as well, which was getting a heck of a lot of brecciated pyritic limestone, which is quite interesting in Ireland. So basically that was about it. And I think at that stage, Glencore said, these guys look at interesting, solid team, interesting prospects. And so, yeah, they became our largest shareholder at that stage. And that was then, so they owned 18% of the company. About a year later, Michael Gentile joined the register and since put in over $2 million personally into the story. Very, very thankful and grateful to have Michael on board here because he's been absolutely instrumental in getting the story out to investors and helping us wade through the waters, and we couldn't have done it without him. So he's a great addition, and I'm sure most of your listeners and viewers know of Michael. He's based out of Montreal. Used to be a portfolio manager, and now kind of it actually is now a portfolio manager in his own right, but also investing his own money in junior mining stocks as well. So Michael's there. Teck has got a legacy stake from the time we bought their two assets, Stone Park and Ballywire, back in 2017. Myself and David are insiders as well. So we used to have 100% of the pie at one stage when we first started the company. I still haven't sold a single share, but obviously as you let people in the door, you get watered down a little bit. That's just the nature of the game. And then in the others category, there's a number of high net worth individuals. There's a few institutions in the door as well. So we're lucky. Some of those people are actually old ex-colleagues of mine, et cetera. So very supportive, very, very happy to have, very grateful to have them on board as well, supportive. We have 200 million shares outstanding, and we have 240 million shares fully diluted. This is a brand new number, by the way, just put out yesterday. Our cash number is 3.4 million as of the last reported quarter. Now, we just put out our Q4 numbers yesterday. So that's a brand new number, 3.4 million bucks. Market cap wise, we were kind of in that 10 million market cap range for quite a while. And then we had a very good last 6 months. I'll show you a share price chart in the next slide, but now we're about hovering between 30 or call it 40 and 50 million market cap over the last 2-3 weeks, especially on the back of our most recent news release where we went up to about 50 million market cap. And we're pretty liquid as well, 264,000 shares traded a day on average over the last 3 months between the venture and the OTC. Here's our share price chart. So again, roughly the last 12 months, I don't have the last price increase where we went up to 28 cents on the back of the news release 2.5 weeks ago, but we were trading at 7 cents around September. We kept on hitting on this Ballywire discovery, but it was really this news release number 16 where we stepped out 160 meters from the prior holes at the discovery, 5 holes, all mineralized, 4 of which were really well mineralized. And that really got the market to sit up and listen. And on the back of that, then we were able to raise $3 million. So that was great. And that set us up really well for 2024. So here's basically our investment summary. I will break it up into sort of one by one manageable chunks. So first, let's talk about the zinc market. It actually has got quite a bit more bullish over the last few months on the back of mine supply constraints. So mines have been shutting down in Ireland, in Spain, in Tennessee, McArthur River over in Australia, et cetera. So there's a number of mines that have actually put mines on temporary care and maintenance or shut down entirely, et cetera, et cetera. And that has created a deficit in the concentrate market right now. So a fairly sizable deficit in the concentrate market. Just to step back one step, I guess, what is zinc used for? For those that don't track it very well, 60% of the demand side is for galvanizing steel, basically making steel rust-proof with a zinc coating. So that's all it is. 40% of the market is in other smaller aspects of demand, but really it's infrastructure, white goods as well, your fridges, your ovens, your cars, and infrastructure are really what drives the bus on zinc demand. And in terms of infrastructure, US and China are the countries to watch. India as well, which is accelerating infrastructure spending. Anytime you're talking about infrastructure and construction, you're talking about steel, and steel requires zinc to coat in most cases. So with that out of the way, I guess, what are the prices looking like? What are the refined inventories looking like? So the black line you see here in front of you is the zinc price. And you can see this is a 20-year chart. So the black line has basically been on a general uptrend with its ups and downs, but generally on an uptrend since about 2016. And that's on the back of, I guess, refined metal inventories globally shrinking and now sort of bouncing along the bottom. So generally, they're still fairly low relative to the peaks we've seen 10 years ago or so now. And the price is actually, again, showing some resilience now at about $1.30 per pound right now. And I think that's on the back of people buying zinc because they see this mine supply shortage coming are already in place and the concentrate deficit that they're seeing. So That's kind of the upside.
Bart, zinc production, is that typically coming from like zinc focused mines, or is it a byproduct as well from other mines where it gives a bit of a credit on the side for other mines?
Sometimes they're copper mines, but I would say in the majority of cases, there's primary zinc mines with lead. Usually zinc and lead go hand in hand. You very rarely have a zinc only deposit. I don't know one, but it's mostly zinc and lead come hand in hand. In Ireland, they're mostly zinc deposits with a little bit of lead and a little bit of silver. The discovery we've made here has actually got quite a bit of silver, which is nice. If you were talking about, say, VMS deposits, they can be very copper and gold rich and have a little bit less in terms of revenue on the revenue line, less attributed to zinc than maybe the copper and the gold side. But in general, yeah, zinc deposits are typically zinc first and other metals second and third.
All right.
Yeah. So I threw this slide in there for your viewers because it is something that anyone can look up. It's very easily, it's third party and it's kind of easily attainable. If you just Google the South32 news release. If your viewers know, South32 is one of the majors. It's a spinoff from BHP from a number of years ago. On the 15th of February this year, they announced they're spending $2 billion on a zinc project called Taylor in Arizona. And as part of that, they released some thoughts on the zinc market. And I thought it was very interesting because they have some really good touch points on there. They're talking about zinc demand being forecast to grow 2% per annum for the next decade, roughly, as opposed to only 1% a year in the prior decade. They're talking about growing intensity of use. They're talking about wind and solar, and they're talking about supply being constrained. And if you just look at China, who's traditionally been the largest producer of zinc, they're saying even they can't flex upward on the supply side because they're restricted by environmental regulations and, importantly, declining grades. And that's not just a Chinese problem, that's also a global problem. So they're saying, South32 is saying that globally zinc grades have nearly halved since the early 2000s. So I take that to be, I've done a little bit of research on this in the background, but it seems like it was about 10% roughly. Now it's about 5%. Zinc, if you add the other metals in there, zinc equivalent would be maybe 6% right now globally. I imagine it's hard to get the exact figures on it, but that's roughly about right. And they're also saying that demand will outstrip supply by 3 million tons from now to 2031, which is an industry challenge of similar magnitude to copper, which is quite interesting because obviously people mostly look at copper. That's got a much bigger audience than zinc does. But here's a sister metal, zinc, sort of in the same ballpark of supply demand fundamentals. So it's quite interesting. And I invite the viewers to take a look at that. Now, the other thing I can point your viewers towards is treatment charges. The lower the treatment charges, generally the more bullish the outlook on the near-term, medium-term zinc price is. Basically, the lower the treatment charge means that smelters are competing against each other for concentrate. So if there's not a lot of concentrate, they're going to be dropping their prices that they charge the miners to buy their concentrate. So the lower the number, the more bullish the outlook. That means the scarcer the concentrate supply is. And so right now, for last year, for example, the number was $274 per ton. The Canadian brokers, some of the Canadian brokers that track this are using now 180 for 2024 for this year. And then the actual metric between Korea Zinc and Teck, this is an annual contract that gets reset every year. So that came back at 164, which is even more bullish than the 180 assumption that this broker had made. So things are quite interesting in this space right now.
And the treatment charges, the lower it is, the more bullish it is because they want to be running their treatment facilities at the maximum volume. So they want to keep it full the whole time. So they're going to charge less to attract more of the zinc ore or concentrate into their facility. Is that how to view it as?
Yeah, they do need to run as much as at full capacity as possible to get the efficiencies and the profits. But at the same time, if there's not a lot of concentrate around, they can't, obviously they would like to charge as high as they can. But if concentrates are scarce, they're going to have to drop their prices to attract that concentrate.
Exactly.
And so if all of a sudden there's a ton of concentrate floating around, they're just going to jack up their prices because they know people are going to come to them anyway. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's a very good barometer for where we are in supply demand fundamentals for zinc by looking at those treatment charges. So So
Interesting.
that's that part. Then there's the green energy transition. I'll briefly touch on that because obviously it's very topical. But when it comes to zinc, it's solar, wind, and batteries. Solar is the bulk of where the zinc is going right now. You know, solar prices have come down quite a bit. There's a lot of solar farms being built, and the framing for those is galvanized steel. So that's number one. Then there's the wind element, which is growing because the world is going offshore now because the onshore is replete. So the world is going offshore, and offshore you need 10 times the zinc to galvanize those wind turbines offshore in the caustic environment than you do onshore. So that's another growing element. But the one that's really exciting in my view is batteries, which is still a very tiny proportion of demand, but growing fast. And so there's actually about 18 companies worldwide right now, which are working on zinc batteries, predominantly for grid power storage. So this is really interesting. It's not for EVs, but for grid power storage. And this is, I think, where zinc could probably eat lithium's lunch in this sector of grid power storage because it is cheaper. Space is not a constraint, really. And it's much cheaper to recycle zinc batteries than it is to recycle lithium batteries. They don't have the thermal runaway that lithium batteries have, all those types of benefits. So there's 18 companies that are part of the zinc battery initiative. And a third of them, I'd say, are commercial right now. A lot of them, like Redflow, is producing, their order book is full. Zinc 5 just won some awards. They were on Time Magazine recently. Zinc 8 is building a pilot plant over in New York, and Zinc is doing really well. So there's a lot of these interesting companies. Something new that I didn't know about before, actually, there's a breakthrough in the Chinese zinc battery market. So there's a company out of China that has figured out a way to really lengthen the cycle life of these zinc batteries and make them powerful as well. So that was something that actually happened last August. So that's quite interesting. So that'd probably be the 19th company or entity out there working on these zinc batteries. So that's sort of an interesting tidbit for your viewers to know about the zinc space and the growing green demand in it. So then I guess turning the page, let's move on to Ireland itself. So I guess the one metric I'll leave you with right now as a bullet point is that 6 prospects have turned into mines that basically turned into mines over the last 60 years. And that means the prerequisites to get to cash flow are here. You've got the tonnage, grade, you've got the metallurgy, proximity to European smelters, most importantly, infrastructure. Outside of the tonnage and the grade, of course, the infrastructure is key for base metal projects, and you have all those prerequisites here. So it is a proven zinc jurisdiction from that respect. Now, I'll have a few more slides on that in a second. The other thing to mention, I guess, is the experienced team we have, which I hope I've demonstrated. We have strong shareholders, obviously, and it's all about the Ballywire discovery. So, you know, that's basically all we're talking about here. If we have time, however, at the end of this presentation, I'll briefly mention the Carrickettle West, which is kind of a Palace-Green lookalike, only 5 to 10 kilometers away downtrend from Palace-Green. So hopefully I'll be able to touch on that at the very end. And just so you know, we have 2 deposits already in hand. Not something that we're focusing on, you know, full on, because our MO, really, our modus operandi was to find something new. These are pre-existing deposits. One is Stone Park right beside Palace-Green, and then the other one is Ballymalac, right 50 kilometers away, roughly, from Believing's Tar deposit, Navan deposit. So they are strategically located within Ireland, and they act as valuation anchors really for the company. That gives us some tonnage. And if you look at the average grades right now worldwide being kind of 5-6%, these grades are not too bad. 9% here, 11% here. They're 5 million ton deposits roughly. They probably need to be a little bit bigger to be standalone. We haven't run any economics, again, not really a focus. They are open. There's a lot of exploration upside there. It's just that we wanted to find something new, and we have, and now we're working on that instead. And then we have, again, on the back of being able to raise $3 million before Christmas, we have a very full year of news, 2 drill rigs running right now at Ballywire. So we're going to be doing quite a bit of drilling at Ballywire this year, as well as at Stone Park, including that Carrickettle West target. So that's basically, you could cut off the presentation there if you want it. But I guess let's maybe go one step, drill down a little bit on the Ballywire discovery. That sounds good.
Sure. I guess just on I think maybe next slide you're going to show the bigger picture of Ireland. Is that what we see next here? Perfect. Okay. And okay, so you're in Ireland, and just in case anyone's not great in their political geography, there's Ireland and Northern Ireland, 2 different countries, right? You're not Northern Ireland. Ireland is a Republic of Ireland's a separate, distinct country.
Yeah, it's not part of the UK. We are a separate, the Republic of Ireland is completely separate. It's part of the EU. in terms of the overall, that we weren't part of Brexit over here or anything like that. So we're in the Republic, or the South, as you could say, as opposed to the North. So it's a completely different jurisdiction with it. And again, the Republic tends to be well endowed with zinc, whereas the North is where is probably a little bit more gold, if anything, in terms of commodities.
And they've got a long like as you were saying, a long history of mining. So it's not just infrastructure, it's the people knowledge. A lot of people who know how to
Yeah,
operate mines and zinc mines specifically.
there's a lot of Irish geologists and miners and geological engineers, and then the accountants, and the whole ecosystem is here very much alive and well. The Irish Association of Economic Geologists, 50 years running. So we just had our 50-year anniversary there in Galway in September. A lot of papers came out of that as well. So yeah, it's a thriving community here, and so we're basically trying to feed into that to find the next big zinc deposit, hopefully to because Tara is the last remaining zinc mine that's been operating for 50 years here, which is part of my deck here, because really, if I just take one step back, the Ballywire discovery that we made is located in that yellow circle that I just highlighted there. The entire Irish ore field is so, like that yellow circle there. And we're in that neck of the woods where there seems to be quite a big concentration of zinc deposits over a small area, which is in part why Ireland gets ranked #1 in the world for zinc found per square kilometer. So that's a really important metric. If you're going to go hunting for zinc deposits, why not go here, where you have probably a better chance than anywhere else in the world to find these zinc deposits. But the other really compelling reason to be here in Ireland is because it really is the land of giants for zinc deposits. So back to Tara, this deposit is huge. It's a 142 million ton deposit. And again, 12% zinc and lead, which this is going back from all the stuff that's been mined plus the existing stuff. 12%, that's a really good grade, obviously, compared to global average right now of like 5-6%. So the land of giants for zinc deposits is real. There's another famous zinc deposit here called Galmoy rather, 10 million tons of 15% zinc and lead, very rich. Lachine was a 20 million ton deposit at 14% with 32 grams. Again, very good grades. Silver Mine's a 20 million ton deposit at 9%. Those are the types of tonnages and grades you typically have, and a nice silver kicker usually associated with it. Now, the one deposit that has not yet been mined, and it's greenfield so far, is Glencore's Palace Green deposit. That's 45 million tons of 8.4%. And so where we sort of fit into the picture is we're in that neighborhood, we're in that Palace Green region. We've made a discovery here, only 20 kilometers away, and we have a small deposit butting up against Palace Green. So there's an ecosystem of deposit. Hopefully one day we'll see a hub and spoke mining operation here one day, hopefully fed on some green energy here, as I'm about to show you. So that's kind of the vision I have, or we all have for this area here. So that's kind of the lay of the land for the zinc deposits within the Irish ore field. One little sidebar here of note is that the academics within Ireland and abroad are starting to talk about Ireland being poised to have the greenest zinc in the world. And this is a really important point, because we do tend to have the clean metallurgy here: coarse, clean, no nasties, rich, which means lower energy to liberate. We have infrastructure, so we have roads, power, year-round tidewater. We have rail as well. Proximity to European smelters goes without saying, year-round tidewater. And interestingly, about 30% of the grid is wind power right now. So there's a big push, especially after Ukraine, to get the offshore East Coast up and running. This has been years in the making, but the plan is by the government, and it's part green, the government is in coalition with the Green Party, is to ramp up so it's 100% wind by 2030-ish. I don't know if they're going to meet that target specifically, but hopefully pretty close. There's about 5 gigawatts of power potential off the East Coast and about 70 gigawatts of power potential off the West Coast. So that's after the East Coast gets done, then they'll move on to the West Coast. There's already a lot of engineering studies that have been done with Bechtel and others working on the West Coast. It's all going to be happening out of the Shannon estuary and off the Limerick area. So we're going to be very well positioned for that to hopefully avail of, if we find the deposits and one day see a situation where there is a sort of a first-class environmental operation here for producing zinc, hopefully we'll avail of the green energy off the west coast of Ireland here. So getting back to the main point, low carbon footprint for potentially the zinc here in Ireland, which I think is an increasingly important point. The other point that I made is 6 mines over the last 60 years, and that is why you have the majors here: Boliden, Glencore, Teck, South 32. That kind of makes sense. And obviously, one last point to make, Fraser. So probably a lot of your viewers would know the Fraser Institute. It's an annual mining survey that ranks about 100 jurisdictions worldwide based on different metrics. But it's interesting to note Ireland ranks number one usually, or number two, number three, but top of the pack usually quite consistently for the last 10 years in terms of the mining policy perception index. So basically in terms of low corruption, low expropriation risk, good transparency, good community relations, et cetera, and how things run here. So that's a really important point to make. So what does it all boil down to? Reduce risk, for the Group 11 shareholder relative to maybe some other story that could be another zinc story, which may be in the middle of nowhere, or could have metallurgical issues, or maybe in a geopolitically difficult spot. Luckily, we have our boxes ticked here in the country. So
And
now
the deposits aren't close to a town or some politically sort of awkward. You're in a nature reserve or anything like that that could get in the way of development.
No, the government wouldn't let you have exploration permits if it's an environmentally sensitive area. Number one. Number two, there's towns everywhere in Ireland, so
Okay.
there's that's not like Navan, for example. The Tara deposit is right beside Navan town, and they've been mining there for 50 years, so that's not too much of a deterrent, I guess. Galmoy and Lachine again in the Kilkenny area. So there's always, I wouldn't say there's no towns where we are directly, but there's always Ireland is full of landowners, so everyone we deal with, every drill hole we drill, the locals, the landowner would know about it and would approve before we even do any work. Any soil sample, any geophysics we do is always pre-approved by the local landowner.
Yeah,
So that's
and
kind
they've
of
all been
how
pretty
it works here.
cooperative and see the vision for the whole thing.
Well, yeah. So far we haven't had any problems, but it's always the number one thing that we do is to make sure that the locals are happy and we clean up after ourselves and everyone's compensated for any time that we take up of their on their land, et cetera, et cetera. So I think all that works fairly well, and yeah, I mean, so far so good. But that's the main thing. I mean, you've touched on the key point. We have to make sure we clean up after ourselves, very respectful. And
Yeah.
that has to be paramount.
All right.
So now getting into, I guess, the Limerick area where we're working. So just zoom in on that yellow box over here. And basically that's this picture. So if we zoom in on that yellow box, you get this picture. The first thing to note, I guess, everything in blue you see is Glencore. Everything in yellow is South 32. Our central ground here is called Stone Park. The crowning jewel, I guess, of that asset is the Stone Park deposit, which is right here, which is right beside Glencore's Palace Green deposit, literally a few hundred meters over from Palace Green. So here we have 5 million tons of 11% roughly, and here we have 45 million tons of roughly 8%, 8.5% roughly. So it's a very strategic land position for us to have. But our discovery is actually made on our 100% owned ground, and that's basically everything you see there in the red. And that discovery was made at the intersection of two mineralized trends, the Palace Green corridor and the extension of the Rathdowney trend, where those two trends meet. Basically, you get that yellow box. And if I zoom in on that yellow box now, you get this picture. And this is quite interesting because it kind of shows you the evolution of the discovery. So I show this because back in 1997, this is as it was in 1997, there was a previous operator here, and they actually came very close to making this discovery. They hit 2.5 meters of 6% zinc and lead. They never assayed for silver, but they did hit 0.5 meter within that of massive sulfide running 20%, which is quite good. Unfortunately, they had sort of more smoke, no fire on the next hole, and then didn't drill deep enough on the next hole to really hit the target horizon. So in 1997, I don't know if you remember, but it was not a good year for mining. So not much was going to be happening around those years. And so fast forward to 2000, they drilled another hole. They got some really splashy copper silver numbers, which were quite interesting, but only over centimeters, not meters. So again, not much happened to carry the day. Then 8 more years pass and they drill one last hurrah. They drill a hole here. They got some pretty decent mineralization, but it wasn't enough to really offset the great financial crisis. And they basically got washed out here. They surrendered the ground. This became open for many years. And we came on in 2016. And we basically we had a huge swath of land all through Ireland. We were the number one land license holder in the country. So we were doing a lot of work around that time. It took us 3 years to get to this area and figure out where to drill. We drilled this hole in May 2019. and basically got
And
very, very.
sorry, so when you got the land, you just staked it. You didn't have to buy it, and there are no NSRs or anything on the land. That's just 100%
No,
yours.
yeah, what you do, we don't buy land per se.
Yeah.
We don't buy anything. We basically sort of rent the mineral exploration license. So it's a prospecting license that you apply
Okay.
for. You apply for it from the government. You apply for it, and then the government grants you a 6-year period that is automatic. Well, not automatically, but you have to renew it every 6 years, assuming that you've done all the work
Yeah.
and you've taken care of everything and made sure everything is clean and up to standard. So
All right.
basically, that's your exclusivity for that mineral for subsurface rights. So as long as then that allows you then to invest money into the ground, work the ground, and figure out what's down there. So that's basically how it works. I think down the line, if you were to discover something and it's, and you've put an initial economics on it and it looks like it's going to be an economic deposit, then you start thinking about, okay, where are we going to position things and where do we need to buy land or anything like that? But that's, we're well away from that yet. We still have to figure out
Yeah.
whether there's something here of economic substance here. So right now it's a discovery for sure, but we haven't found the boundaries of it yet. We haven't got a mineral resource estimate on it yet. That's still probably a couple of years away.
All right.
So that's kind of how that works. So back to this, I guess, is we drilled our first hole here, got close, got some smoke, no fire, but it was pretty close. It was 2 meters of 6% with 22 grams. It was getting there, very encouraging. 2 more years pass, and we decided to go up here, and this time we got our first snippet of real solid looking mineralization, widths and grades. So over 3 meters of 12% zinc lead and 48 grams silver, very nice silvers. And within that was a half a meter, 25% zinc lead and nearly 100 grams silver. So we were very enthusiastic about that. And we didn't know how that tied in with that hole from 1997. It looked very similar with those 2 half-meter slugs. So we decided to basically spread our wings here and drill 300 to 400 meter step outs. So we drilled here, we got okay mineral, better mineral, and then bang. On the last hole, we got our discovery hole. So as it happens. And this was a 66-meter zone of mineralization, 3% and 29 grams. So nothing to scoff at there. But within it was 11 meters of 10% zinc and lead and 100 grams silver. And then again, within that, 2 meters of 41% with 385 grams per ton. So phenomenal intercept. Hand on heart, this week we were happy to call this a discovery at that stage in September of 22. And we kept on drilling, as you do, obviously. And every single hole hit mineralization, hit massive sulfides, etc. The real standout was this 60-meter step out, which got another wide intercept within that was 10 meters of 9% with 46 grams per ton. And again, within that was a nice 2.5-meter slug of 30% zinc lead and 160 grams silver. So again, nothing to scoff at there. We're very happy with all those results. We kept on drilling, pushing east because we thought, things seemed to be heating up as we were moving east.
Bart, how deep were these drill holes where you're hitting the mineralization?
350 meters, which would be considered relatively, these days, that's not very deep. That would be considered a nice depth, actually. It's kind of a perfect depth. It's sort of 250, 350 meters is a really nice depth. Galmoy was 100 meters. Lachine was around sort of 300, if I recall, 350, not too far away from where we are here. So it makes for a good underground operation, and not too deep, not too shallow either. So it's a good distance down.
All right.
So this hole, for example, again, was one of the best holes. We drilled 18 meters at 10% with not 100 grams, now 250 grams per ton silver and not zero copper, but now copper starting to seep in here, 0.22 copper. And here we were actually getting up to 990 grams per ton of silver. So almost Mexico type silver grades that we're getting in Ireland. And again, these zinc deposits sometimes have silver, and if they do, they're roughly about an ounce per ton. Here we're getting up to 990 grams per ton, 920 grams per ton, and obviously a lot of hundreds and a lot of 200s, etc. So it's a good indication maybe the strength of the system is hopefully quite robust. So that was good.
Similar to the other mines and drilling that's been around there, or is your high silver grades an anomaly even for that little region?
It seems that it's an anomaly for the region because even Palace-Green has zero or effectively zero silver. So our Stone Park deposit has effectively zero silver. It's just zinc lead and nothing else. So there's very little in terms of Palace-Green Stone Park in terms of silver credits. So maybe on the south side here, maybe we're closer to some kind of a heat source here, perhaps. But the system seems to be a little bit hotter than your average Irish type zinc deposit, for sure. And seeing the copper in there as well also tells you that. So it's a little bit of a different animal in that it seems to be hot, the higher temperature, which maybe has more of a precious component to it.
All right.
And then the last press release that really did good things for our share price was that November 21st news release where we released 5 drill holes. And basically, I'll just zoom in on that yellow area just to show you how those drill holes fared. So basically, this is 710 meters of strike. We're at bird's eye view here. And just going from left to right here, we got, for example, 9 meters of 8% with some nice silvers on it. Here we got 3 meters of 8%. By the way, mining widths in Ireland tend to be about 2.5 to 3 meters. So the 3 meters is pretty good. We're room and pillar mining here, usually in Ireland. And I guess for a reference point, Glencore's Palace Green Deposit, Glencore uses, I believe it's 3 meters of 4% as a cutoff. 3 meters of 4% is the distinction between ore and waste at that deposit. But that's just a reference point. If you're kind of starting from nowhere, that kind of zooms you in a little bit. And then here's 5 meters of 12% with really good silvers. And then the last hole actually was our headliner, 11 meters of 9% with 83 grams per ton. So really, really good intercepts. And again, that's what made the market sit up and listen in the fall of last year. And then the question becomes, okay, but what does it look like in 3 dimension? Is it all scattered or does it actually line up pretty well? And so thankfully, I'm just going to show you the long section here. The long section is pretty definitive. It speaks for itself. The mineralization is all very consistent, which is very nice to see. So this is obviously along the strike of the discovery to date. This is over 700 meters, but you can see all that red area is the high grade zones. Sort of the yellow is the sort of lower grade zones that are disseminated in vein style mineralization, and some of the massive sulfide bodies here at the base. So number one, it's textbook. This is how most zinc deposits in Ireland form at the base of this green unit, the Wall-Sortian limestone. Number two, it's continuous. It's not faulted or folded. You know, a lot of deposits out there that are geologically much older, you know, they've gone through a lot of tectonism, a lot of faulting and folding, and they're very tough to follow because you can lose them and then not be able to find them for years again. So this seems to be, you know, knock on wood so far has been terrific in terms of following it up. It's been very linear, very well behaved. So, and obviously this side here at the east is the burning question. What happens as we drive on eastwards? That's the 710 meters strike. And then this leads us to the news release from 2.5 weeks ago. So this is the 710 meter strike at the discovery area. I'm just going to overlay now the gravity anomalies that we ran last summer. So basically these dark spots basically show areas of higher density as per our gravity survey. So basically telling us there's something of higher density within the limestones, within 400 meters of surface. So that's all we know. That's all the geophysics can tell us. Whether it's mineral or not, we don't know. So that was a good vector for us to try to figure out where to drill next. The next thing we did is we also lined up, you know, the high grade zone here, massive sulfides from the drilling is that sort of blue solid line. And then if we project that straight on, you kind of get that dotted line. So those were our sort of metrics. And what we did is we drilled these holes, and we just announced this 2.5 weeks ago, and that's what, you know, drove our share price up nicely on the back of that. And so the first hole, these were massive step outs, by the way, 530 meter step outs.
Wow.
And 930 meter step outs. So we've done a Trojan work here. Usually it's kind of step out 50 to 100 meters at a time. Here we've just leapt right over that and went straight over to test this gravity anomaly here. So big steps, but we were rewarded in that we didn't get duds. We got mineralization in all the holes that we drilled. Some more than others, but certainly mineralization in all. Very good for a first stab. And so this hole here was 4 meters of 300 grams silver and 0.7 copper. So actually quite good. 1% zinc and lead. So it's a little bit lead zinc poor, but copper silver rich, which typically means you're right at the feeder structure. There's probably a feeder structure running through here, which basically corroborates that projection as well. That dotted line basically means we're on the right track, because if we actually step back, the hole that we drilled 100 meters south of that didn't get much. It was mineralized. You had visible sphalerite in it, but it didn't really kick that much. And it basically shows you, it looks like the system is increasing in strength as we approach that dotted line. So that's good. So at least we now have a reference point. And then the 930-meter step outs also hit mineralization. And the southern hole got about 3 meters of about 4%. So kind of in that in-between area, but a little bit of silver in there as well, but still pretty solid for a 900-meter step out. And then 100 meters to the north of that, we got a much better intercept of about 5 meters of 5%, with double the silver, roughly 15 grams per ton. So not too bad. Not too bad at all. And also, I should say, we got up to 1,400 grams per ton silver here. So we beat our old 990 grammer from previous drilling, and we got 1,400 grams per ton silver, which is 1.5 kilo silver per ton, which is quite strong. And within that hole as well, we got up to 5% copper. So there's some really nice numbers coming out of this. So that was that. 2.6 kilometers is what the strike is now. If you take a look at that hole from 1997, our discovery area here, and then the step outs that we've made here, that's 2.6 kilometers of strike, where we've had intercepts of robust mineralization. Then the question is, well, what does it look like in cross section? Long section looks like it's all lined up, but does it stay well behaved if you look at it 90 degrees on? So let's look at this well-defined cross section here. And the answer, thankfully, is yes. It is very well behaved, and it all occurs at the base of the wall sorption. It's still open to the south and to the north. We just haven't drilled it out. And here it's getting quite shallow. I mean, down to probably 100 meters depth, et cetera. We'll probably follow it up when in due course. When we've answered all the other burning questions, we'll come back to this area and we'll drill it further to the north, all the way up dip. But the nice thing is this is very continuous and predictable mineralization, which is fantastic, obviously. And obviously all the sections we have all along are all the same, meaning they all occur at the base of the wall sorption limestone. I'm not going to show you all the sections here, but you can see it on our website. But that's a really good thing, obviously. And then the next question I suppose you might ask is, well, 2.6 kilometers is nice, but what's the real big picture here? So the real big picture is, I guess, if you take a look at our gravity anomaly map here, this anomaly is anomaly B, this is anomaly C. And the C1 anomaly here is right over top of our discovery area, and that's that 2.6 kilometers. So if I zoom out from that picture and look at more our regional gravity survey, or regional gravity data, that's basically these gravities B and C over here, and some of the drilling that we've done. But notice that there's anomalies A and D on either side of them. So we have gravity anomalies within the limestone. That limestone carries on through across largely in an east-west fashion. Roughly. And so, we now know that C is spatially associated with mineralization. We have this anomaly D over here. There's a drill hole that was drilled it looks like about 2 kilometers away, 1.5, 2 kilometers away, historically back in 1999. And actually, it is actually mineralized at 14 meters of mineralization, including 1 meter of 4% and 1 meter of 2%. Silver was never assayed. So way out here is a hole that actually tested the horizon, and it's still mineralized out here. We're not really calling that as part of our 2.6 kilometers, but that's work for us. That's encouraging that we have a gravity anomaly and we have a historic hole here to maybe hang our hat on. And then on the other side, there's this rather strong anomaly here, anomaly A. Again, no drilling. So, anomaly B hasn't been tested. Anomaly A hasn't been tested. Anomaly C hasn't been tested. So there's a lot more exciting work for us to do. And that gives us a 6-kilometer strike. So again,
you got some of your high grade stuff at the gravity, call it low points, I guess, in between B and C. So it's occurring in many places. It's not just in the high gravity areas.
That was my observation as well, when we first got the data back. And when we got the detailed gravity back, we did find once we got more tighter spacing on the data points from the field work, we realized there actually was a gravity anomaly in the middle here as well. And then this is the detailed gravity anomaly here that I'm pointing to. And that's just that C anomaly is a little bit more of a broad brush. I mean, the spacings are way wider on that.
And it's modeling. It's a lower resolution image from the scale we're looking at.
Exactly. Yeah, lower resolution is the way to think about it. Yeah.
Okay.
So it is quite interesting, and obviously there's nothing to say there's no mineralization beyond A and D either. But I think right now we're pretty happy to say it's a 6-kilometer prospective trend. How does that compare to, say, an existing deposit, let's say Lachine, which is our next deposit over 50 kilometers along the Rat Downey trend? and this was a very profitable mine, machine 20 million tonner. And zooming it basically at the same scale as the underlying map, you can see how it fits into this box. So you can probably fit 2 of these inside this box. So I'm not saying there's, double the tonnage, but that kind of gives you a sense that we have a lot of room here to discover something that could be like a tier one asset one day, obviously. So forward-looking statement there. The Lachine deposit, by the way, just to zoom in on it and show you, this is a plan view map of the thickness of the massive sulfides, looking sort of bird's eye view down. And you can see the magenta areas are where massive sulfides are greater than 10 meters thick. And then the blue areas are ones where the massive sulfide is less than 3 meters thick. So it's essentially like one blanket of mineralization gently dipping, more or less, and there's thick parts of the blanket and thin parts of the blanket. So that wouldn't be surprising if that's the sort of morphology we see at Ballywire. But of course, we're still in the early innings. We might not actually have found the high grade zone yet. We might just be skirting around the edges so far. That's probably statistically more likely that we're still on the edges. We haven't really found the heart of the system yet. So that's kind of what we're hoping as we progress this drilling.
With what does the landscape kind of look like? I don't know, postcard Irish landscape there, or there sheep running around there, and what I'm getting at is, is it just the gravity surveys, or is there rock sticking out where you can sort of do sampling work on ground to get on surface to get idea of what's going on underground? What sort of surface level clues are there?
Yeah, there's not a lot of outcrop in Ireland to be
Okay.
sure. So Ireland's has been and continues to be obviously outcrop constrained. So you're very much tied to geophysics, geochemistry, but
Okay.
geochemistry is tough because of glaciation, and on top of that, urbanization. Generally, everywhere there's a road or something, so you might have contamination from just cultural effects. Same with the geophysics. So it's a little bit tough. So it's more a country where you want to get your bearings in terms of geology as much as you can, and then work off the historic drilling, because that's the best information.
Yeah.
Have a really good database of your historic drill holes, because that will tell you where you are, and that'll build your geological picture. And then you're basically following, where do you think the faults are? Where do you think those faults meet the base of the Walls-Horsham limestone? So luckily, offsetting all those uncertainties is the certainty of the model you have here. You're relative to other deposits worldwide that you could be chasing. These deposits are somewhat simple in certain ways, because you're chasing a fault, and as it intersects the base of the Walls-Horsham limestone. So that's the kind of premise. That's where you're going after this,
All right.
with that in mind. So that's basically how it works. If that answers your question.
That does. That's perfect.
Yeah. So basically, that's Ballywire. I'm not sure how we're sitting on time here, but in summary, it's a great jurisdiction. I like to call this an advantaged asset as opposed to a stranded asset. We are in infrastructure. We have proximity to European smelters. So it's a proven jurisdiction. So we have that big box going for us and ticked. We have 2.6 kilometers of drilled strike length. We have 25 holes into this, all mineralized so far. Every single hole we drilled is mineralized. We have the 6 by 2 kilometer very prospective search area. We have these gravity anomalies, which are super compelling. And we have Lachine as a very nice geological analog, 50 kilometers over our next door deposit along the trend. And we're the first ones to have cracked the code here at Ballywire. So it means we have the first crack at the blue sky potential of what this could be, as opposed to, inheriting this project as an old zombie project you're trying to revive, and just basically trying to outsmart the old timers, which is usually the play there, right? If you have an old asset, you're just being smarter than the previous workers. But here we're actually having the first kick at the can in terms of what's the potential here. So I think that's very exciting. And that's basically Ballywire, and that's where we're at right now.
All right.
There is germanium here as well. Just FYI, again, I don't know how much you want to spend on germanium. It's a little bit of a specialty metal. But it is in the news because there's a chip war going on between China and the US, and germanium is very central and caught in the crosshairs of that.
Would it, from what you're seeing there, would it add significant or material economic value to the ore?
Well, germanium is worth double that of silver.
Yeah.
So if you look at these grades and if you imagine that they're silver grades, they wouldn't be too bad as silver grades, and germanium is worth double that of silver. Now,
Okay.
offsetting that, so that's very positive, obviously, but offsetting that, the metallurgical recoveries have yet to be discerned. Germanium, we've only basically, in order to get accurate germanium numbers, we have to basically re-assay the pulps using a lithium borate fusion. That's a very specialized assay technique that can get you accurate germanium, gallium, and indium numbers. And so we have none of those we have very little gallium and very little indium, but we have quite a bit of germanium. And yeah, I think it's of potential significance. Again, we have got to do a lot more work before we can actually
Okay.
say that
A
it's
little
going to
more
be
blue
a
sky.
big, yeah, but I think it is certainly better to have it than not have it. And
Yeah.
it's an additional carrot in there for, for future value and decreasing economic risk and what have you. And for
And it's not a
example,
contaminant of any sort where it messes up the ore processing later on.
no, not as far as I'm aware. And so Red
Okay.
Dog would be a great example. Red Dog hat is a zinc mine that has germanium in it, and Trail produces that con gets sent over in part at least to Trail, and Trail produces a germanium product out of it. Kapushi, which is Robert Freeland's Ivanhoe's deposit in the DRC, it's a zinc deposit, and the U.S. Geological Survey points to that deposit actually as being one of the highest grading germanium deposits out there, and that's grading about 64 grams per ton. Germanium doesn't concentrate very well on the Earth's surface through processes. So you kind of get low levels and then you get slightly above low levels in the Earth's crust, and that's as best
Yeah.
as you can get. Germanium is just one of those elements that doesn't really play ball very well with the geological processes. So it's very hard to concentrate. So to have
All
it in
right.
these kind of between the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s grams per ton, I think is a very good thing. And again, we'll see how Kapushi does in generating that. So look forward to disclosure from them on how much it actually adds to the bottom line. But it is
Yeah.
nice to know, and it's a nice sweetener for us, if nothing else.
You haven't done any metallurgical work yet, have you?
No, we haven't really, not yet. Um, but that's, I think the first protocol is definitely to define where are the edges,
Yeah,
where's the hot spots. That's probably going to be, a couple of years, I would
for sure.
imagine, depending on how drilling goes here. And obviously, it's a very dynamic field. Figuring out what it is that we have here, and then at that stage, we can figure out what are the high grade zones and start sending some of that to Metwork.
Yeah.
Get a preliminary mineral estimate on here at some stage, and then once you do that, then you do some of the preliminary economic assessment work after that. So I think that's
All
all
right.
forthcoming.
All right. We've got a couple of questions. I've got a couple of questions. Why don't we just very briefly hit on your other target and just a couple of minutes here so people have a bit of context, and then we'll do a few more questions before we wrap it up.
Great, sounds good. So very quickly, this is our second target. So I'm just gonna zoom into here. This is our familiar regional picture. We're just talking about Ballywire. Now we're going to move 20 kilometers uptrend to the Palace Green area in this yellow box. And basically, if I zoom in on that, I get this picture. And this is as it was in 2015. Okay, so the red zones are the mineralized zones. Obviously, they're surrounded by these pyritic breccias. That's all fine and good. Now, what's interesting is that there was a revised, the paper was revised only a few months ago, and the new shape, the outline of the deposit was published, and it's shown now to have grown with subsequent drilling 1 kilometer further to the south. So now it's only about a kilometer away from our property boundary, which is quite interesting. And now we know kind of that it's extending towards in that direction. The other tidbit from that paper was the silver heat map. So as you'll notice, the north side of the deposit here is devoid of any silver, but silver seems to be picking up as you're moving south. And the hotter the silver numbers typically are, the closer you are to the feeder structure. So that's also quite interesting potentially. So then one layer of additional information, if I zoom out a little bit further and then look at where these deposits are positioned, they're positioned on the north side of this Limerick volcanic complex, which is a big 20-kilometer wide volcanic feature. Very unique, by the way, very unique. Speaks of some deep plumbing within the Earth's crust here. So that's quite interesting. And basically, there's geological parallels here in the north side and the south side. But the north side has been very well explored historically, well explored relatively. However, the south side has been unexplored completely. And so we're the first ones to really be drilling south and then moving northwards. And we've already found small pockets of high-grade mineralization. At Carrickittle, for example, we got 10 meters of 20% zinc and lead. So interesting. We have pockets of a lot of alteration, this pyritic brecciated Walsrosian limestone, over hundreds of meters and spread out over kilometers over here in the yellow. And then perhaps most importantly, we tagged into about 2 years ago, summer of 22, we tagged into a big fault, down drop of 150 meters. So like the largest fault in this entire area that we know of. And that was quite compelling. So this whole area, this Carrickettle West area is quite interesting because, you have 5 million tons here and 45 million tons sitting. It's a very well endowed area already found, and there's geological similarities between the north and the south side here. So this whole area is quite interesting, quite prospective. David and Mark right now are working up the exact drill plans for this area. So we'll put that out in due course. So I'll leave it there. That's another little tidbit for you as well.
All right. Going just to, if you can go back to the map there with Stone Park so close to the Palace Green, is that, not to get too speculative here, but that seems to be a nice add-on to the existing mine that's operating there, or is that the potential for you to? I think you maybe even mentioned hub and spoke earlier in relation to that. How does that fit into your plan? Could that be sort of hived off at an earlier stage? Because it seems like it could fit in well with, I believe, Glencore's project there.
Well, yeah, exactly. And Glencore's project, just to make the distinction, is not yet in production. So it is a greenfield project. Obviously, it was acquired when Glencore took over Xstrata back 2012 or so. And there's a lot of projects that, I think were hived off after Glencore took over Xstrata. But Palace Green has remained within the coffers of Glencore, and Glencore has continued to work the ground here. And they put out annual disclosure on it as part of the Reserve and Resource Report, annual report. So we know that they continue to drill, and obviously they've invested in us. So that shows some kind of long-term vision here. So how it fits into the whole plan here, it's pure speculation, but clearly, I think the observation you made there is a correct one. This is a shallower, higher grade, albeit smaller deposit. So it would make sense that you might want to start at the shallower end, the higher grade, to pay back initial capital. But again, that's highly speculative, sort of in the future kind of thinking. But I think there is a potential here within, say, a 20-kilometer radius within Ballywire, Stone Park, Palace Green. There's a number of deposits. Hopefully, there'll be more discoveries over the coming years here. Hopefully, Carrickettle West will one day, I'm hoping we'll see some interesting things happening there, maybe in the not too distant future. So we'll see what happens. But it's a very interesting camp.
Definitely.
To your point. Yeah.
All right. Quick questions here from the audience, and thank you for that. With the closure of Tara Mines, have you had any discussions with state agencies about either financial or technical support? And also, what kind of discussions or interactions do you have with Glencore?
No, we haven't reached out to the government to ask for any concessions, and I think it's probably a little premature for us to be doing that as of yet. I think when we know, in the future, if we have a deposit and we have a feasibility on it, at that stage we'll be discussing with the government as to what kind of aspects, what kind of. Usually, the government would probably want a little bit of. Obviously, they're going to get a lot of tax revenue, but they're also going to have a little bit of a royalty. So that's always up for discussion at that stage. Usually it's a fairly low, reasonable royalty level. So that type of discussion, but again, we're, I think, years and years away from that type of thing. I'd love it if we had some kind of a flow-through system here for mineral exploration, so tax credits for investors. But that really hasn't. That really hasn't proven to be a goer as of yet. But there are interesting things happening on the EU level. So the Irish Strategic Investment Fund just announced that they've teamed up with Lionhead, for example, a South African group, and 30 million euros is going into Irish strategic critical metals. For example, there's been a new act just passed literally last week on the EU level of the European Critical Metals Act, and it's meant to decrease dependence on Chinese metals supply. So Europe is getting it seems quite serious about securing supply for metals, and especially critical metals, and zinc would be under that category for sure. So certainly maybe the tide may change in that, and a little bit more focus on if we're going to embrace the green transition, you got to have security of supply. Certainly, if germanium, zinc, and all those metals would be pretty important for the Europeans and the Irish governments.
All right. Great presentation. What is the average corporate burn rate, and are rock mechanics good, and is there much water infiltration?
Well, great question. So what is the average corporate burn? About 70 to 100 grand a month.
Yeah.
So to keep the lights on. And then obviously sort of drilling on top of that, but in terms of corporate burn to pay all, and I'd like to think that's on the lower side. We'd obviously try to keep it as low as possible. We try to run very, very tight, lean and mean operation, and do things, go about it we probably, there's a lot of debate as to how much marketing, investor relations we should be doing. That's a big element of it as well. But I'd like to think we're doing things, a good amount, but a good reasonable amount for the size of company that we are. But that's about that. To answer your first question. Your second question, rock mechanics, it's actually quite competent. Rock quality is good. RQD is good. Water infiltration, we haven't seen that as as certainly not a problem in the drilling that we've had. There generally you can have areas of karst in Ireland in general, but so far at Ballywire we haven't had any issues with that yet. And again, knock on wood there, but so far so good.
And when you say rock mechanics, that's that it's structurally sound. It's not going to collapse when you're room and pillar mining, or what do you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Well, the concern I think that that the person asking the question would have is, if you actually go down there eventually, if you're mining it down there, is the rock quality going to be poor? So exactly what you say. Is there going to be a lot of shotcrete and drilling involved to prop up everything, or is it going to be fairly competent? Because the more competent is, the easier the mining and the safer the mining is. So far, we've seen very good rock quality.
All right. And one last bit of questions here. What's next? You raised some money. You're drilling right now, I believe. What kind of milestones or catalysts should investors be looking at for let's say, the coming year, and the money you raised recently? How far does that take you?
We're good for the year. So we do, we tend to raise money every 12 to 18 months. We tend to raise about $1.5 million to 3 depending. So that's historically looking back. That's just generally how exploration companies work. But we do have a fairly nice balance sheet right now. So lots of news expected before we ever have to think about that later, probably into next year. So everything is funded for this year. Again, for Ballywire and the Stone Park drilling. The actual holes that we're drilling right now as we speak are just highlighted here. So it's hole 10 and 11 that we just drilled north of the other two holes, and this hole and 9 as well. Plus we're obviously drilling other holes as well. Once we drill those, then we'll be drilling other ones, and then we'll be putting out news hopefully over the next, obviously we try to have regular news flow out there in relatively good intervals. So hopefully not too much of a wait for the next batch of drilling. Gotcha. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So I guess, obviously Ballywire is a focus, but we will be doing some work at Carrickville West and the overall Stone Park property. It is
on Ballywire. Sorry, you're stepping out. I forget on the rightmost targets with their gravity anomalies. Is that where your drilling is going to focus, or are you going to? I guess that would be the A anomaly on the very left. Just broad picture. What are you trying to accomplish? Are you going to do any of the infill drilling, or are you trying to find where how open it is in whichever direction? What's the broad goal?
It's a bit of both. So we certainly want to chase things a bit northward from where we were drilling, because I think that's where things seem to be heating up, and that would be the projection. Certainly over here on the C2 and the C3, in the middle as well, just to connect the dots. I think that's important, and also definitely on B. Because we have this anomaly defined. It looks really interesting. There's some really interesting holes that were drilled here. Actually, that hole from 2000 that I mentioned at the early onset that had really splashy copper silver numbers. That's really, really interesting given what we've learned over the last 18 months. because the
Yeah.
high copper silver usually means you're right at the feeder zone. And so this hole probably was analogous to, you know, the feeder zones that we're getting here that we know just on the edges of it are very well mineralized. So I think going into this area, testing Anomaly B is certainly in the purview of what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks and months.
And
And
just
after that, we'll
broadly,
see.
for the remainder, or for, let's say, of this drilling program until you have to raise some more money, like how many holes or how many meters would one expect you to be able to do? And I guess just as an add-on to that, what's the rough cost per meter of drilling in Ireland?
Good question. $150 per meter, roughly,
Canadian
is
dollars?
Canadian dollars. Yeah, roughly.
Okay.
Yeah, roughly $150 per meter.
Yeah.
So it's a relatively decent in terms of world averages out there. You can
Yeah.
have in North America in certain areas, especially if you have to do a lot of cribbing on the side of a cliff or
Yeah.
rugged topography, and you have to
Yeah.
helicopter in and everything. The costs really ratchet up to like $400 or $500 a meter, right? So we're lucky we can just drive up and
Yeah.
park and start drilling pretty much off the trailer.
Yeah.
So that makes things much easier. So that's that. How many meters? Well, typically we drill about 5,000 to sort of 7,000 meters a year. So
Okay.
this year, given the momentum that's increasing at Ballywire and everything else, I'd hope that we'd be able to provide more guidance to the street on that, but most probably on the upper end of that goalposts of
Yeah.
those goalposts would be the aim. But again, we haven't put out anything definitively yet, so I guess don't quote me on that. But that would be the rough goalpost of what we typically drill.
And your typical drill depth or drill length is going to be what, 300-ish meters, 3 to 400 at most, or?
Yeah, we're lucky. We're lucky here. Actually, these holes are going to be shallower because we're working up dip,
Yeah.
so maybe even 250 meters. And the
Okay.
further up we go here, pretty much the drill holes would be like 50 meters deep. You know, if we
Yeah.
go up here, down here, I'm not sure. I probably in the I would say probably the same because we're a long strike. So I would imagine 300. I'd say 200 to 300, 350, maybe 400 meters deep. So
Gotcha.
we're in a pretty reasonable depths regime here
Yeah.
for both
Okay.
the C and the B anomalies, and probably for the A and D. It's all probably going to be at the same depth because we're just going a long strike.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That was, I really enjoyed that. That was interesting story. You told it well. I appreciate that. Any final comments or sort of tie a bow on it? Any thoughts you want to leave with investors before we call it a day?
No, I just look forward to, anyone that has any questions reaching out to me. I'm always available. I think we have an exciting story here. We're fairly keen on the green aspect of things here over the sort of longer term. So that excites us. So we're keen on the zinc market as well and all the developments that are happening in the zinc space. So we look forward to, getting some exciting drilling done and exciting drill targets done, and look forward to talking to people, chatting to people, and hopefully seeing people face to face at some of the conferences. I'll be going to the New Orleans show later this year in November, for example, and probably some of the others in the interim. So hopefully see folks out there, and yeah, thanks very much for people taking an interest.
Bart, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Fascinating story. Looking forward to keeping in touch and seeing this develop and see what else you find out there.
And thank you, Martin. Really appreciate the platform here.